Hey there, and welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer today, because we are going to completely shatter some really common misconceptions about African history. Way too often the narrative of African history is treated as if the clock only started ticking with European contact in the 15th century. But today, we're pulling back the curtain. We're going to uncover the incredibly sophisticated civilizations that were thriving in Nigeria long before European ships ever even appeared on the horizon. So let me ask you this. What exactly do you think was happening in the region we now call Nigeria thousands of years ago? If you've got this picture in your head of isolated or, primitive communities, prepare to be completely amazed. We are talking about ingenious technological advancements, highly structured political systems, sprawling empires, and totally robust economies. These were dynamic societies building immense wealth, expanding their territories, and creating just breathtaking art. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The ancient Nok pioneers. 2. Northern empires and trade. 3. The Kingdom of Nri. 4. Oyo and Benin empires. And rounding it out with 5. Women, agriculture, and the economy. Section 1. The ancient Nok pioneers, iron and earth. Let's kick things off right in central Nigeria, a place where archaeological discoveries have literally blown the lid off traditional historical timelines. 1500 BCE. I just want that date to really sink in for a second. This marks the emergence of the Nok culture. We're talking over 3.5 millennia ago. While other parts of the world were just barely beginning to form basic settlements, a deeply complex society was already taking root right here. And as you'll see on this timeline, the Nok sustained a vibrant civilization for a staggering 1,500 years. Starting in the mid-2nd millennium BC, they grew consistently. By 900 BCE, they were already producing their famous terracotta sculptures, these incredible human and animal figures used in complex funerary rituals. This absolutely wasn't just a flash in the pan. This was a millennium and a half of continuous, rich cultural evolution. Plus, the Nook weren't just brilliant artists, right? They were technological innovators. Did you know that the Nook independently developed iron forging between 900 and 550 BCE? They were literally smelting iron and creating tools centuries ahead of many other global cultures. And get this, they were part of a deep maritime history too. The Dafuna dugout canoe found in northern Nigeria is approximately 8,000 years old. Yes, an 8,000-year-old boat. There is no way around how impressive that is. The Nook used similar canoes to move cargo along tributaries like the Garara River, hooking them into massive regional trade networks. Moving on to Section 2, Northern Empires and Trade, Saharan Wealth. Let's shift our geographic focus northward, where we encounter these vast, wealth-generating empires that totally dominated the arid landscapes and the trans-Saharan trade networks. First up, the Kanem-Borno Empire. Founded around 700 CE, this is genuinely one of the longest-lived empires in all of world history. Based around Lake Chad, it survived for over 1,000 years. This empire grew incredibly wealthy by controlling Saharan trade routes, exporting things like salt, ivory, and animal products. At its peak, its influence across the region was just massive. Then, by the 11th century, slightly west of Kanem-Borno, the Hausa people established the Hausa Bakwai, which means the 7 true states. And these definitely weren't just small, quiet towns. They were fiercely competitive, heavily fortified walled city-states. Places like Kano and Katsina became these huge manufacturing centers and absolutely crucial hubs for merchants and the massive camel caravans crossing the Sahara. So we've seen how the northern empires used those huge desert trade networks to build up their military and economic might. But that makes you wonder, right? What about the societies closer to the central and southern forest regions? How exactly did they expand their influence without those Saharan caravans? Section 3, the Kingdom of Nri, Power Through Peace. This brings us to the Kingdom of Nri, established in the 9th century in the Igbo heartland. And their method of expansion was incredibly unique for its time. Honestly, it's unique for almost any time in human history. At the head of this kingdom was the Eze Nri. But he wasn't your typical warlord leading an army. He was a priest-king who possessed divine authority. The Kingdom of Nri actually expanded its influence not by conquering its neighbors with swords and spears, but through religious conversion and diplomacy. It was considered a holy land. It literally served as a safe haven for rejected peoples, and it was even a place where enslaved people were set free. Now, what's really fascinating here is how they maintained order. Without a traditional standing army, how do you keep a kingdom together?
Well, the Nri used a strict, symbolic taboo system. Ritual specialists with distinct facial scarification would travel around with staffs of peace to cleanse communities of abominations. If you followed the Igbo religion, you abided by these taboos. It created this vast sphere of political and religious influence built entirely on peace and harmony.
And this sets up a really fascinating historical contrast. On one side, you've got the Kingdom of Nri, expanding through peaceful, theocratic integration. But on the other side, just to the west, you have the rise of the Oyo Empire, which built its massive influence through aggressive military expansion and the strategic use of cavalry forces. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Oyo and Benin Empires, Statecraft and Might. These great Western and Southern empires were characterized by formidable military strength, for sure, but also by some incredibly sophisticated political statecraft. In the Oyo Empire, the king, who was known as the Alafin, was powerful, absolutely. But he was not a total dictator, because he was kept in check by the Oyo Messi, a council of 7 principal state officials. Now get this, if an Alafin became too autocratic or started acting against the interest of the empire, the Oyo Messi literally had the constitutional power to compel him to commit suicide. I mean, talk about an ultimate check and balance. It was this dramatic life-or-death political framework designed specifically to prevent tyranny. Meanwhile, further south, the Edo Kingdom of Benin was making a massive mark of its own. Ruled by expansionist Obas, Benin was famous for its gigantic concentric earthwork architecture. By the late 15th century, Benin had become this fierce, independent trading power. In fact, they were the first in the region to receive foreign traders, establishing an early dominance in international coastal trade with the Portuguese. Finally, Section 5, Women, Agriculture, and Economy, the backbone of the state. Okay, so we've talked about kings, councils, and cavalry, but we really need to pivot to the foundational bedrock that actually allowed all of these massive empires to survive, feed their people, and thrive for centuries. And that bedrock was the economy and food security, which was driven overwhelmingly by women. History often overlooks this, but scholarly research makes it incredibly clear. Women were the active, beneficial engines of the pre-colonial Nigerian economy. The whole concept of a full-time housewife just didn't exist here. Women were absolutely critical to agricultural labor, trade, and local industry. They were the ones ensuring their societies did not starve. There was this really fascinating gendered division of agriculture going on. Men typically tackled what were called the male crops, primarily the yam, which was very labor-intensive and considered the king of crops. Women, on the other hand, managed a hugely diverse array of female crops, things like cocoa yams, cassava, beans, maize, and all sorts of vegetables. And this division was just brilliant for food security. Women didn't just weed the fields. Their diverse crops ensured a balanced, nutrient-rich diet for the family year-round, which was super important when the yam harvest ran out. On top of that, women sold their surplus harvests in the local markets. They generated essential income, which gave them tremendous economic capacity and real independence within the household. But they definitely didn't stop at farming. Women were the industrial powerhouses of the pre-colonial era. They completely dominated critical manufacturing sectors. They were the master potters, the cloth weavers, and they ran the extraction of palm oil. These manufactured goods fueled both local markets and those massive regional trade networks we discussed earlier. Simply put, without the labor, the ingenuity, and the economic drive of women, these great empires simply could not have existed. So that brings us to the ultimate question. We've seen 8,000-year-old canoes, independent iron ages, 1,000-year empires, complex constitutional checks and balances, and a thriving economy powered by female industry. If these dynamic, complex, and highly structured civilizations were thriving for literally millennia before European contact, how does that completely rewrite our understanding of global history? I really hope this explainer has given you a glimpse into the awe-inspiring tapestry of ancient Nigeria, and that it leaves you hungry to learn more about Africa's true historical legacy. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring.